Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining SEARAC's community call. We're going to get started here, and my name is Monica Spate, and I'm SEARAC's Field Director. SEARAC is a national civil rights organization that empowers Cambodian, Laotian, and Vietnamese American communities to create a socially just and equitable society. And we also stand together with other refugee communities, communities of color, and other social justice movements in pursuit of social equity. And as you can see, I want to introduce our amazing SEARAC team. Quinn Dinh, who's our executive director, will be sharing a lot on this call around our legislative updates. Again, my name is Monica Spate, and I'm SEARAC's outreach and field director. And we have our wonderful Suvan Lee, who is our tech support. And so let's talk about logistics just a little bit before we get started. Everybody's already in, all attendees are already placed on mute, and so we want to make sure that there's no background noise, so we took care of that. If you have any comments or questions, you must be logged into the webinar. And so during the Q&A portion, feel free to ask questions. Also feel free to comment throughout the webinar if you want to in the chat box. If you have some things that are pressing you don't want to forget, feel free to put those in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get to those at the end of the webinar. And all the questions and comments will be addressed at the end. And one thing I want to remind everyone is that we've uploaded about 5 resources that you can use when you're doing your advocacy or things just for you to take note of. And so make sure you download those before the end of the webinar. And so I'm going to turn this over to our Executive Director, Quinn, to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica, for the great introduction, and welcome everyone to our community call. To give folks a sense of what we'll be doing today, we will start with providing some updates around pieces of legislation that we're tracking that we're really concerned about, especially as it relates to the Southeast Asian American community. We will transition into sharing ways that folks can continue to stay engaged and take action on these issues, as well as resources that you all will be able to access in case you want to learn more. And we'll close out with Q&A and comments from the community. So to begin, I'm going to ask for Suvan's help to begin our first poll, which is to ask folks to share where you are joining from today. So you should see a poll that's been pulled up, and the options are West Coast, East Coast, North, South, and Midwest. We will give folks just another couple seconds to respond if you haven't. So we'll 3, 2, 1, and we can go ahead and close that out. And it looks like the majority of our folks are joining us from the West Coast, with equal distribution from the East Coast and Midwest, and even some folks from the South. No representatives from the North Coast this call, or maybe that also means, actually, I don't know. So we'll figure that representation out, but thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have such strong representation from you all as leaders from across the country representing Southeast Asian American communities. And to take us into our overview portion of the pieces of legislation that we're going to share, we wanted to first ground the conversation by sharing our analysis of how SEARAC sees our community self-determination being built, particularly around exercising our rights to fight for equity through 3 major pillars. One is our right to family through immigration policies that unite us rather than tear us apart, our right to heal through health policies that address intergenerational trauma of war, displacement, and poverty, and finally, our right to be seen and served through education policies that are equitable and that really both value and serve our students where they're at. And what we've been seeing on the national end, unfortunately, is that we're seeing some major attacks on all 3 of these fronts under this administration. And to begin, we'll share out on what we're seeing on the education front. One of the proposals that are being discussed right now on the House side is called the PROSPER Act. And what the PROSPER Act does is that it is proposing to reauthorize the Higher Education Act. For folks who may not be familiar with the Higher Education Act, it's a critical national policy that provides support to colleges and universities to serve students. And it is in particular really helpful in addressing the inequity that we face in Southeast Asian Americans around college completion. We know from census data that college completion continues to be a huge challenge, where over 50% of Vietnamese Americans and over 60% of Cambodian, Lao, and Hmong Americans still lack a bachelor's degree today. And for folks like me who was a first generation low-income college student and was the first to graduate from my family with a college degree, the Higher Education Act was really critical in really doing three major things. One is that it increases accessibility to college through programs like TRIO and Gear Up that provide support to first-gen students in understanding what the college process is like. Second, it increases affordability through programs like Pell Grants, which were critical for low-income students, as well as the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which I'm currently on, and which provides loan forgiveness for folks who work within the nonprofit or public sector for 10 years. And finally, it also increases completion rates for our communities, where we know that funding goes to culturally relevant community and student-centered approaches through programs like minority-serving institutions, including the UNAPC programs. So what we're most concerned about is that the House of Representatives are likely to vote on this the week of the 11th or 18th. Currently, we know that it is being championed by House Republicans, but they actually don't have enough votes to get it to pass. But we're still tracking this as a really dangerous policy proposal as it impacts our communities, particularly around a couple different items. One is that it would make college less affordable by eliminating the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and also it fails to increase Pell Awards, even though the cost of living and inflation has increased for our students, which means that Pell Grants are not increasing with the economic need that our students are facing. And finally, it also makes the college process less supportive, particularly in cutting funding to the UNAPC program and other higher education programs, which have really been critical at providing low-income first-generation students additional resources and support to graduate from college. And with that, I know that was a lot of information, so we wanted to pause there just to get feedback from you all. So the polling question that we're going to ask is, given the challenges that you hear or that you've heard of, what is most concerning to you? The options are elimination of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, the Pell Grants not being increased, and reduction of UNAPC funding. And we'll give folks just about another 10 seconds to respond. We have about 35 folks who've responded, now 40%. And we'll give folks just another couple seconds. And we'll go ahead and close out. And thank you all so much for responding. It looks like the major concern that folks are really feeling is the impact on Pell Grants. And really, for me, that was also such a critical resource in financing my higher education system. And a lot of us here at SEARAC would not have been able to go to college, period, had not been for this program. So we really thank you all for your feedback. And And you'll also see that SEARAC will be issuing a statement in opposition of this proposal. And as discussions go further, we may call on your support to share feedback like this around the concerns that our communities are really facing around higher education. And so that was the major overview of education so far. Transitioning into immigration, immigration has been one of the biggest areas of attack that we have seen since the Trump administration began. And what we're concerned about today is the attempts within Congress actually to continue to really push immigrant policies that attack our communities. Right now, we're looking at a bill called Securing America's Future, which has been introduced by Representative Goodlatte. We believe that the bill may come to a vote on the House floor in June. And what we're particularly concerned about is that it would revise our immigrant visa allocation provisions, including family reunification. In particular, it would cut family immigration by 25 to 40% by eliminating the ability of citizens to sponsor parents, adult children, brothers and sisters. And the only categories that would remain are for U.S. citizens to sponsor over spouses and minor children. We know that this policy in particular hurts Southeast Asian Americans because immigrants from Vietnam face the fourth largest number of visa backlogs in the nation, with over 250,000 individuals waiting in line to reunite with their loved ones. Cambodia has a backlog of more than 9,000 people, and Laos has a backlog of over 2,000. And what we also understand is that family members caught in these waiting lines can wait up to 13 years or more for the applications to be processed. And for SEARAC, we see family reunification as a critical solution to addressing generational displacement of war, where our communities and families were forced to be torn apart from each other, and seeing family reunification as one of those solutions to really closing this displacement, this forced displacement. So that's one major area of concern as it relates to this policy proposal. The other two concerns are that it would increase deportation enforcement through a couple different ways. One is that it proposes to increase deportation in exchange for temporary protection for folks who are dreamers. But what we do know is that the protection for dreamers is limited and that it would only be for 3 years and there's no pathway to citizenship. We also know that the proposal would criminalize even documented individuals, even if that person has not violated any laws that led to them being undocumented, and that there are also proposals to subject folks to potential incarceration for 6 months to 20 years. And finally, the proposal also really hurts the ability of our law enforcement to build community trust. For example, law enforcement agencies at both the state and local levels could potentially lose federal funding if they essentially don't comply to these laws and regulations. And this would, in particular, impact states and locales who are currently sanctuary cities who are refusing to comply with these national policies because they're trying to create a safe haven for the undocumented community. And with that, we'll go ahead and pause again for our poll to see how folks are resonating with this analysis. So the question that we're going to pull up, similarly to education, is what challenges most concern you around this particular proposal? The options are the cuts to family visas, the increase to enforcement, or the impacts on law enforcement for community relationships. And we'll go ahead and give folks about another 20 seconds to share their response. And we'll give just about another 5 seconds. Great, and I think we'll go ahead and close out the poll and share responses with folks. Thank you so much for your feedback. So it looks like folks on the call are particularly concerned about the cuts to family visas, as well as followed by enforcement, deportation enforcement, and then local law enforcement. One of the questions that we got was how can folks find the data that you're referring to in terms of visa backlogs? Great question. We pulled this, we created a fact sheet around family reunification. This is data from the, I believe it's from the Immigration Bureau, but I have to double check on the data source. At the end of our webinar, we will include, we have links to those resources that are also included in the PowerPoint that we'll share out actually. So you'll be able to access it through downloading the resources that are already included or going directly to our website and clicking on our resource hub. And thank you so much for the question. So I think we'll go ahead and transition into our last policy update, which is around health. Actually, second to last. So on the health side of our work, the major piece of legislation that is being debated right now is the Farm Bill. This is the nation's primary agricultural and food policy for the federal government, and it is incredibly important in funding programs like SNAP for low-income communities. Currently, we know that lawmakers have until June 22nd to take a vote on the Farm Bill. They did vote earlier in May and it didn't pass. And we're hoping that it continues to not pass because one of the major challenges that we're seeing is that there would be a provision to require folks to increase work as a prerequisite to accessing SNAP. And where this is particularly challenging for Southeast Asian Americans is that we understand that low-income families are already working multiple jobs just to meet ends meet, and oftentimes working an additional job is not going to be feasible, and additional employment also decreases the types of benefits that families have access to under our broken entitlement systems. And finally, we also know that this is an issue that impacts our communities because on average, our communities experience poverty at higher rates compared to the general public. When we look at census data, about 11% of U.S. families live in poverty, and this is higher in all of our communities, from 13% for the Vietnamese community and 27% for the Hmong community. And I also know that had it not been for programs like SNAP, my 4 brothers and I would not be where we are today, and we have understood its importance and recognized its value in our families and communities for so long. So with that quick update on the health portion of our work in the Farm Bill, we'll pause again to ask our next polling question, which is if you or someone you know would be impacted by this policy. And we have a couple folks who've responded, so we'll keep it open just for about another 20 seconds. And we'll give folks about another 10. Great, then we'll go ahead and close out and share the results. So it looks like over 80% of folks on this call would be impacted directly or know someone who would be impacted by this policy. So this is really helpful for us to affirm that the issues that we're tracking are really pressing and critical for our communities to continue to be updated, knowing that this is going to be an issue that impacts a lot of us. And we will continue to provide updates as well as potential actions around the Farm Bill. And finally, we'll go ahead and share our update on the last policy area, which is an issue called public charge. This is an issue that impacts all of our programs or all of the major policy areas of education, health, and immigration. And the reason for that is because currently it is a term that's used for a person who is likely to become dependent on government services for support. And this determination is a result of a lot of different factors, including usage of government assistance programs like SNAP, like Head Start. And the real challenge around public charge is that if you are considered a quote-unquote public charge, it can be used to deny someone's ability to enter the country, and it can also lead someone to have their application for a green card to be rejected once they're actually in the country. This potential, the Trump administration has leaked a couple different versions of changes that they would like to make to this definition to make more immigrant communities essentially be termed a public charge. We know that the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Agency has felt a lot of pressure under the White House to draft a new definition of public charge, and that the next process in terms of making it legal is that it would have to first go through the Office of Management and Budget to be reviewed, and it would then be open for public comment for about 60 days. We know that a version was presented to the Office of Management and Budget in March, but that they have not released the final language. So a lot of advocates have been waiting for this for months, and what we heard is that it may come out sometime this summer, but we don't have any information as of yet that's changed. And then in terms of how this is going to impact our communities, again, it really impacts two categories of immigrants. One is future immigrants who would be denied entry, who are from low-income immigrant communities or who would be sponsored through family visas. The second category of immigrants would be folks who are here legally but haven't gotten their green card. And what's most troubling is that it would also impact U.S. citizen children whose parents are immigrants and whose families are really accessing these services. And finally, it does that by expanding the list of public benefits that would make someone a quote-unquote public charge. So what we're concerned about is that families are going to have to choose whether or not their children can access Head Start or whether they can sponsor their mother or father to be reunited. And so it really is a ridiculous decision about surviving here in America while being displaced from your family. It's a decision we believe immigrant communities and families should not have to make. And while there are groups who are protected from this, including refugees and asylum seekers, which include many Southeast Asian Americans who are here in the U.S. today, we see this proposal as an attack against all immigrant communities and our right to live, to thrive, and to heal. And as beneficiaries of these programs, we really believe in standing up for the rights of all immigrant communities to arrive and thrive here in America. And with that, I will close out my portion with a final poll to ask folks what challenges, actually, the last question is if you or someone you know would be impacted by this proposed regulation. And we'll go ahead and keep that open for another 15 seconds. And we'll give folks just another couple seconds to respond if you haven't yet. And we'll go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like 69% of folks on the call today knows someone or themselves would be impacted by this public charge policy. We will, and this is really, again, rich information for us to help guide our information sharing as we continue to update the community about this proposal. It may or may not ever happen, but in the meantime, we also see this as an opportunity to really engage our communities in understanding potential threats and also understanding our capacity and ability to stand up and fight for the rights of all immigrant communities. And with that, I will transition it to Monica to share more about how folks can take action on these issues.
Thank you so much, Quinn, for those updates. You know, after hearing all of those concerning policies moving, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what can we do? Sometimes I think we often feel like so many things are happening and we sometimes feel hopeless and helpless, but we can take action. And it's important to remember that our voice is necessary and it's powerful. And so the first thing we can do to take action is to call your member of Congress. This is so important. What we have to realize is that when we call our members of Congress and we contact them, it's a way to educate them and to let them know that they have an engaged community that is listening and looking at what they're doing. And so when you call your members of Congress, tell them to oppose any legislation that ends family-based immigration and expands deportation, along with the other challenges Quinn mentioned with the other policies. And so we have a link that you can follow. And if you click on the first link, the Immigration Take Action link, you can get a full understanding of what's happening. And the second link, you can actually click on that link to find your rep. And when you go to the website, you'll see an image with some information. You can disregard the link on that image, and you can use these two links to take action. And we'll have these webinar slides uploaded in GoToWebinar for you. And so once you take action, the second thing you can do is stay informed. It is really important to stay informed. I'm a firm believer that an educated community is an empowered community, and an empowered community is an educated community. And so, you know, you can join SEARAC listservs for updates. Our role is to really make sure we educate and share information with you and give you the tools that you need to be able to take action on policies that are impacting the community. You can also join Protecting Immigrant Families campaign. This campaign is a national campaign that SEARAC is a part of, along with other organizations. And you can get all the public charge updates here. They're constantly on top of what's happening, what's moving, what's happening in certain states. And so if you want to be a part of that campaign or get that information, you can certainly join the public charge campaign. And the third thing that you can do to take action, and I don't think we always think about this as taking action, but I think that one of the most important things we can do is educate other people. And so we know how it is when we spread information. We you know, someone tells us something, we tell somebody else, and it just spreads like wildfire. And I think it's important that we share this community call and some of these other resources with our community members. Again, being educated on these issues really helps us take meaningful action. It also lets our members of Congress know that they have a constituency, a community that knows exactly what's happening. And so we would love for you to share this webinar and other resources that we have. And finally, we would like you to share your story. If you click this link, you can go to a document that allows you to share your story. It asks you a couple of questions. And so what you can be confident of is this information is confidential, and it's only used so we can continue to advocate around these issues. And I think it's really important to understand, as SEARAC's Outreach and Field Director, one thing I'm really clear on is how powerful a story is. And when members of Congress understand that the community, their constituents are actually impacted by these issues, they tend to pay attention a lot more. And so if you are willing to share your story, you have questions about that, please click on this link and allow us to kind of work with you. If you have a question about anything, you can contact me. My contact will be at the end, and we can get your story and continue to advocate on these issues. And so we talked about some resources. I have these resources linked here. And we have at least, I think, 5 of them we have uploaded. And so again, don't forget to download those resources. We have resources for everything Quinn talked about, analysis on the bills. We have a public charge fact sheet. SEARAC has written a brief on family immigration and some important data on that document. And so all these resources are for you to use to educate other people, using your talking points if you need to. And if you have any additional questions, again, you can contact me. And so now we're going to move into our question and answer period, or comments if you have some. And just before we get into the questions and monitor that discussion, I just want to remind you that on your screen you should see a raise hand icon. You can click on that icon and you'll be unmuted once you raise your hand. And remember to share your name. Remember to respect other viewpoints. And also, if you could, try to be brief and share your comments or your questions within 2 minutes. You can also chat your questions if you are unable to raise your hand, or if you're on the phone and you can't chat or you can't raise your hand, you may just want to, I don't know, maybe break in and just say, hey, I have a question, and we can maybe put you in a queue. We'll figure that out. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and move into our questions. So start chatting those questions in, and we're going to get started with that.
So one of the questions that we've received is from Arnold. Arnold's question is if WIC would be impacted through these different proposals, which is a great question. It looks like it is not impacted through the Farm Bill because it's actually funded through a different policy. However, we know that families who are on WIC also tend to rely on SNAP. And so that's how Farm Bill would impact the WIC program, even though it wouldn't eliminate it. And then for public charge, we do understand that WIC is in the program areas that would make an individual qualified to be defined as a public charge.
And the public charge fact sheet may list all of the programs that they're considering under public charge, and so you may be able to find more information there as well.
One of the questions we have, I think, is from, maybe ask Nikki Chan, or the question is if there are any resources on how to find state money for immigration work from past bills, which is a really good question. We can connect with our immigration advocates to find this out. It would be helpful to know if there are particular states that you're interested in. We do know that California, for example, has passed legislation to increase support around citizenship as well as support to undocumented community members. But we don't know overall how many other states nationwide have passed similar policies. So if you can actually email Monica at SEARAC.org, and we can also email you directly just to clarify. We can help to connect you with the right resources. We have an additional question from Vamala Pangsaveng, who would like more information about work related to data disaggregation and how we're combating some opposition that we're seeing. This is a great question. Thank you, Vamala, for asking. So SEARAC has created a data protection campaign to focus on protecting the major landmark data disaggregation bills that have been passed in the past 5 years. And to give folks some context in case you're new to the issue, we have at SEARAC really been pushing for the collection of more detailed data around our students' ethnic representation, because right now all of our student data is lumped under the Asian category, which really hides and masks the tremendous challenges that our communities are facing. And so we did try to pass this on the national level through the All Students Count Act. Unfortunately, it failed by just 2 votes. But what has been really incredible is that this policy has actually been passed in Washington State, in Minnesota, as well as Rhode Island. And in California, while we weren't able to pass it through legislative statute, the California State University System and the University of California systems have agreed to implementing it, and so we call that a win. All of these policies passed within actually the last year and a half, and so they are at a point where implementation is going to be really critical. It's also a critical point because we are seeing increased opposition from a small but very loud community who is opposing data disaggregation on some arguments such as leading to less resources being provided to other communities within the Asian American community, and also a linkage to what we don't believe is true, but what they believe would impact affirmative action and higher education, because they're afraid that this would lead to quotas for different Asian American categories to be accepted, as well as decreasing the acceptance levels by communities who are currently overrepresented. So what SEARAC is doing is that we have created a national platform for advocates to connect with each other on a monthly basis, to share resources and their analysis on what they're doing in each of these states, to really hold the ground on these different policies against attempts to repeal these pieces of legislation. We're also going to be undergoing a big communications project and helping to shift the way that we talk about the work, and also educating the community at large on the benefits of data disaggregation. So if you're interested in joining those monthly calls, you might be interested if you're in one of those key states, which is California, Washington, Minnesota, or Rhode Island. 2 other states that we're monitoring are Connecticut and Massachusetts, because the opposition has come out particularly loud in those states. Or if you represent a state that is interested in introducing data disaggregation legislation in the next couple of years and would like to know how other folks have approached this campaign, you're more than welcome to join us.
We have another question from Amanda, who's asking, does the public charge determination or the proposed regulation include refugees? It does not. And so refugees and asylees are exempt from the public charge determination.
Hi, we have another call. We have another question from Annie. What do you think the prospects are in the House of Representatives for a discharge petition vote that would lead to the passage of a Clean Dream Act? So this question, it's a little tricky here. There's two things. So right now, I believe they are, so a number of things need to happen. Right now, they are 2 votes shy of a discharge petition. So what that means is if that passes, that allows for 4 bills to be debated and voted on at a later date. So we think that the discharge petition has a good chance of passing, but we also still then have to fight all of the immigration bills. So of those 4 bills, one of them would be a Clean Dream Act, but then there would also be 2 really bad immigration bills, and then 1 kind of moderate immigration bill that is kind of helpful but not very comprehensive in its support of families. So all 4 we would be fighting all 4. So given those prospects, I think it's probably pretty slim for a Clean Dream Act. And then one more question from Arnold. The information for potentially joining the working group, I believe this is for the data disaggregation group. Just email me. My name is Suvan. It's spelled SOUVAN at SEARAC.org. And I'll loop you into our work.
We have a question from Solomon, who's going to be here in DC as part of a lobby day, and is wondering if there's anything that folks should be advocating for in particular, especially for those who already agree with us on these baseline issues. I would say definitely to reiterate the points on these 4 major policies, to give them an understanding of how it impacts Southeast Asian American communities in particular. Oftentimes these offices understand and are in agreement with us on these issues, but actually don't understand the depth of its impact. And so educating them on those points would be really helpful, even though we know that they are in favor. And if they want to go the extra mile, we can always ask them if they are willing to champion any policies that move us beyond the proposals that we're talking about now, meaning are they willing to champion different pieces of legislation that would be better for our communities.
And if you're looking for talking points for some of those resources, some of those resources have talking points. And so if you don't find what you need, just reach out to me, Monica, at SEARAC.org, and we'll see if we can get you the information you need.
And we'll give folks maybe another 30 seconds if you want to share any questions that you might have before we transition into our closing questions. Great, so it looks like any other final questions? Okay, so we'll transition it back to you, Monica.
Thank you guys so much for that information and I'm sorry, for the questions that you asked. It's really helpful for SEARAC. It really helps inform our work, and it really helps us provide the support that you need as you're doing advocacy in your community. And so we're going to end with a few more polls, and we want to just hear from you. I want you to tell us what you think so that we can really serve you best when we do these community calls. And so our first question is, Siobhan's going to help me and launch that. What issues would you like SEARAC to cover in the future? We have health, immigration, education, or whatever's moving. So we'll keep this open for about a minute.
Second.
We have about 10 more seconds. We'll keep this open. All right, let's see what we have. All right, so about 56% of you are really interested in whatever is moving. Whatever is relevant is what you want to learn more about, so we'll keep that in mind. And it looks like education and immigration are split evenly. 44% are interested in health and immigration, immigration and education, and finally health. And so we'll keep that in mind as we continue to host these community calls. And so we'll do another poll. And we want to know, what strategies would you like to learn more about? Campaigns or civic engagement? About 5 more seconds. All right, let's see what we have. Oh, interesting. We have campaigns and civic engagement at both at 36%. That's really helpful to know as SEARAC continues to move campaigns that help advocate and fight against these issues. And then we have organizing and communications last. And so we'll certainly keep that in mind. And so we have a couple more just to test and to poll you to see what your thoughts are. How often would you like to join these calls? What will be helpful for you? Would it be every month, every other month, quarterly? Let us know what you're interested in. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. You can get those votes in to see what's helpful for you. All right, let's see what we're looking at. Oh, wow, 50% would like monthly calls. So that's really good to know, so SEARAC knows how to move forward. 30% obviously every other, and quarterly is not enough. And so we'll make sure that we have these calls more often. Thank you so much for that. I think we have one final one, Siobhan. Thank you guys for your patience with our polls. It really helps us. What platform would you prefer for future calls? Facebook Live, where we just hop on live on Facebook and can engage with you. Zoom, where we can do a video conference and see each other. GoToWebinar, which is our current platform that we're using, or you don't have a preference at all. About 10 more seconds. All right, let's see what we have. Okay, 36% of you are like, let's keep doing what we're doing. And the other 36% is no preference at all. And Zoom and Facebook Live, not really interested in, and that's fine. So this is helpful for SEARAC to know as we move forward in what we're doing. And so thank you so much for taking the time to answer these polls and inform us and what's going to work best for you. And so as we close out, I'm going to have Quinn close it out. And Quinn, take it.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica, for being our co-moderator for the day. If folks have follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Monica at searac.org. Also, thank you to Siobhan Lee for being our awesome education policy advocate. He's actually transitioning out of SEARAC at the end of this month, so we're really going to miss him. But on behalf of the SEARAC team, thank you all so much for joining and really helping us to hear our community's voices, whether you are a past intern like Tagana Lee, who's on our call, or partners who we've worked with for a long time, or maybe this is the first time that you've joined us and are looking for more information about SEARAC and SEARAC communities. Thank you all so much for joining and being part of this community. We definitely look forward to building out our content and have noted that campaigns and civic engagement are a particular issue that folks want to learn more about, especially with 2018 being such a critical election year for midterm elections. So please be on the lookout for a follow-up email, which will include a link to this recording if you'd like to share that or review the content again. And be on the lookout for our next call. We had been planning on doing monthly calls, so the next one will be in July. Thank you all so much for your affirmation that this work continues to be important and that our hope is to continue providing as much relevant information that folks can act on as quickly as possible. So with that, thank you all so much again. Happy June, and we will see you again in a month. Take care.